The only thing I would contribute is last night, Pam and I spent a bit of time at the ACT meeting, and probably the largest item, two items that you might want to know about is one,
You'll need to speak into the mic.
is the federal issues that are occurring, and there might be a stimulus package in that, but more importantly, probably was the I-205 tolling. We spent a lot of time, and our colleagues in Clackamas County are certainly concerned about the route as it will be told. So it was an interesting conversation and something that impacts us mildly, but them a lot more. So that was a good part of last night.
And when you mention Pam Treese being there, it's in her capacity not being a commissioner, but in her normal job.
Yep, with WA.
Yep. We just have to make that clear to our community members. So, anything else from commissioners?
No, other than I did attend by Zoom the mayor's Westside Economic Alliance event last Thursday, and it was interesting, entertaining, and informative as well.
Thank you. Before we go on to leadership communication, we have a couple of things to get squared away with on the board for today's agenda. We have changes to our formal agenda, which I'll get to in a minute, but we have two items for commissioners to participate in. The first that has been released to the public is our Pride Proclamation. Are there any changes that board members wish to make with regard to the order of who's reading that so that we're all clear on the order?
Jerry and I will reverse the two sections.
What section was yours, Royce? I'm not seeing the instructions, so I've just got the proclamation.
So that would mean that in the third paragraph, Commissioner Willie, you would read the third paragraph.
Okay.
And that whereas LGBTQ Americans, and Commissioner Rogers would read whereas the landmark.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Here we are.
So you'll want to swap your two there.
Yep.
Okay, then the other in your email yesterday is a proposed statement for us to consider reading today at the beginning of our meeting with regard to the death of George Floyd and the need for racial justice. I saw an email from Commissioner Rogers with regard to some requested language change, so I wanted to bring it up here for our discussion. So I believe Commissioner Rogers is proposing both in the title, changing the word murder to death, or something along those lines.
Something different, yeah.
Well, we're now at the finalizing the word stage, so
I don't have the proclamation in front of me.
it's in the packet?
Right, I saw that. I need to pull it up. I didn't care for the word murder. Murder is a technical term that has to do with, it's very legal, and I strongly believe everybody has a right to, even if I don't like what they did, and even if I think they're guilty of sin, to at least have a trial. So there's got to be some other wording that would be appropriate.
Well, with the timeliness of the matter and what's happening in our community, I propose that we issue a statement today and read one on camera. So unless there's a different proposal for swapping out the word murder for death.
I can accept death. If it's murder, I won't vote for it.
Well, it's not something we would vote on. It would just be read. But I want to make sure it's a statement that commissioners are comfortable with.
Would you consider death by force?
I'm just concerned that, we have an American way of life that you get a fair trial. And do I think the guy's guilty? Yes. Do I think it was inappropriate? Yes. Do I think it was terrible? Yes. But the wording is, death is an easy term by force. I don't know that that's a problem. Probably okay. Yeah.
Death by force? Okay.
Thank you, Roy.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Are there any other word changes that?
No.
Okay. Other commissioners? Perhaps, Elizabeth, could you make a hard copy of this and get it to commissioners? Okay. Okay, those are the two statements I wanted to make sure we got set on. And I was afraid I would forget them, so thank you for letting me do them up front. We also have a proposed letter from staff for me to sign on behalf of the commission. We were sent a proposed letter yesterday, or at least I saw it yesterday, and I asked for a change. And so a change is, or has been issued. I didn't make a hard copy of that. Oh, yes, I have it right here in front of me. Excuse me. So I'm asking the board if you're okay with me signing this letter with the subject of Washington County Partnership Commitment for FY 2020, helping obtain prosperity for everyone, Tualatin Valley Highway Transit Project Development. And this is a letter to the Federal Transit Administration signing on. It's a letter of support for funding for the helping obtain prosperity for everyone competitive funding opportunity.
It'd be silly not to sign it.
Yeah, we're
Everybody
good.
okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, great. Put that there in case it's the copy I'm supposed to sign. I don't want to mess it up. Okay, then we'll go through leadership communication and then come back to the formal agenda. All right.
I got just an update for the commissioners. Saturday night, 6 o'clock Saturday night, we had a Zoom meeting regarding the testing and the migrant worker camps. And that was with Virginia Garcia and Central and Washington County, and I can't remember if there was a fourth group, but anyway, there was about 10 of us online, and we had a good discussion about actions we need to take and what actions are being taken. And so, yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know that that's kind of top of mind right now, especially in my district with the migrant camps, or the worker camps being populated, and so we can have all this wonderful fresh fruit and vegetables throughout the summer. But we have to make sure that we don't have a spike, and so we're being very proactive about taking care of those and making sure we have plenty of testing available. And then I've been reaching out to my mayors. Met with the mayor of North Plains yesterday, Banks last Friday, just finding out how their cities are doing, how we can help them, and letting them know a little bit too about the CARES dollars, possibilities there. But I think it was mostly just to find out what particular projects are going on in their cities that are important to them. And certainly, as you know, Banks has had a building moratorium now for about a year because of water issues. So we're talking with them about how we can help them get some aid from other sources or whatever. So yeah, it's good conversations. I'm going to continue that with Gaston and Forest Grove and Cornelius coming up in the next week or so. So it's always good to reach out and talk to the cities.
So as I was out and about all over the county this weekend, but particularly in the agriculture field areas on Sunday, you can see that particularly Townsend Farms has really done, I think, a good job of putting in place their restrooms and hand washing facility to an extent that I've never seen in prior years before. So it's good to see that they're doing the work to adhere to the sector guidelines that the governor and OHA requires. OSHA, excuse me, I said that wrong. Okay. CAO Steve Rhodes.
Just as I'm sure you've noticed, we've begun the reopening process for the county organization. Our support services did an excellent job of developing signs that are posted around our buildings and on the floors if you look down to help people model what we need to do with the reopening. We also, where staff have contact with outside individuals, we're logging those in so that we have those available. That's required by by our rules for reopening. And that will allow us, if we need to do contact tracing in the future. We're sort of reopening slowly. It's partly based on the amount of time it's taking support services to be able to retrofit public-facing areas so that our staff have the protections of plexiglass and other measures that we can implement as we reopen. We would expect by next week we should have all of our functions back reopened to the public. We're still encouraging people to do their business online if they can, and make appointments if they can also. But we're also open and available for people to walk in.
Actually, I should say that we went to a well-known chain of brew pubs last night, and every other 2 tables had plants, so we couldn't sit there, but we could sit on the tables that didn't have plants on them, and we had a meal, and it was nice to be out of the house. It was nice not to have takeout food, especially because we're doing some work in the house at the moment. But it was just really nice to be out and nice to be supporting our restaurants.
Thank you. Mr. Rapplier?
Nothing to report here.
Okay, and how about for Clean Water Services?
Just an announcement that our budget committee meeting is on Friday, so it'll be here at the county, and it starts at 9 a.m.
This room?
in this room.
No traveling to the CWS building.
This is better set up for Zoom and all the public pieces. Yeah.
I have a quick question of you. On your reopening, what are you doing?
So right now, the team is still working remotely with all of the folks that are needing direct services from Clean Water Services. We are getting the counters ready with plexiglass and all of that. So right now, we're not having a call for walk-in service, so we're just keeping track of what's going on.
When are you opening?
We don't have a distinct date we're going to reopen the building yet until we get it fashioned.
All right. Also, on the formal agenda, I just want to bring to your attention that item 5A, appoint members to Washington County Aging and Veteran Services Advisory Committee, had been revised compared to the very first publication. Item 6C is an added item to declare an emergency related to COVID-19, and this is a timing thing for us to take care of. Item 6D, as in dog, approve coronavirus relief fund work group recommendations is there should we want and need it. Item 6E, approve COVID-19 legislative principles has been added as well. This follows the work session discussion, presentation, and thumbs up on those from last week. Then on the consent agenda, item N, as in Nancy, amend contract for interim county administrative officer was an added item. Are there any other questions on the formal agenda? Okay, then without further ado, we'll move on to the agenda with item 2, CARES Act Coronavirus Fund Work Group Recommendation, also known as CRF, Coronavirus Relief Fund. So you have a bit of material in your packet, and an update as well from today. So what you all know, did you want to kick this off, Mr. Rhodes, or do you want me to kick it off? Oh, I'll kick it off. Okay. So as we know, the CARES Act was signed into law on March 27th. Subsequent to that, the U.S. Treasury issued guidance in late April about the use of these funds. These funds are intended to be used to cover costs related to responding to this coronavirus, COVID-19 crisis that we've had between March 1st and the end of the year. So that guidance from Treasury was very helpful to give us an idea of how the funds can be used and not used. The county itself has received a disbursement of $104.66 million. We are one of 3 jurisdictions with a population over 500,000 here in the state of Oregon. The city of Portland received a disbursement, and Multnomah County received a disbursement as well. Outside of that, the state has received a disbursement as well and has issued guidance to local counties about their receipt of dollars and following the guidance from the Treasury. So Mr. Rhodes suggested that we start up an internal work group to put together a framework for the board to consider for the utilization of these dollars. And that's what you have before you today. We here on the board went over a draft set of goals and 4 principles a couple of weeks ago, and you all issued a thumbs up on the draft set of goals and principles. Those remain, as you saw previously. What we did do is a considerable amount of brainstorming at the beginning about how these dollars have been used in the initial response and how they might be used for community benefit through the end of the year. And some of the ideas we found were covered by other funding sources. This Coronavirus Relief Fund, CRF, and I'm trying to not use too many acronyms, is not the only way that jurisdictions such as ourselves or cities can be reimbursed for cost. The standard FEMA cost recovery and disasters does still apply, though by different financing requirements. So what we sent you in the packet is taking, oh, sorry, I skipped over one very important step. Washington County staff did a lot of work to try and estimate our costs from March 1 through really June 1st, our reopening date, as well as estimating our costs through the end of the year. And, you know, we had initial estimates, but we really wanted to make sure that we had a high confidence estimate so that we could then better understand of the 104, what does the county not directly need itself to cover costs. So what you see in the framework before you, and now I'm looking at this, I pasted the sheets together so I could look at it in a glance, is that the total cost estimate for Washington County is $55 million, being $54 million for the things that you see listed under Protect Public Health, and then the $1 million for reimbursing the small business grant for a total of $55 million. That $1 million comes under the principle of stabilize the local economy. We do know that our cities and our service districts have also incurred costs in responding to this coronavirus. So we just got some high confidence cost information from Clean Water Services late in the day on Friday after the packet had been updated with this. So the information you were given this morning, the paper copy, embodies or has what was in the packet. We call it version 1, okay? But then we also said, oh, we've had the benefit of new information. And so we've tried to take advantage of that new information and put a new version together. But I don't want to get jumbled up here yet. So if I might, if I could just speak to the framework, the initial framework, and make sure we're anchored on some basic facts on that first, and then go over the difference between the two versions. Is that okay? Okay. So back to the framework issued. So what we wanted to try and do was have a framework that ensured that we were putting these dollars into action in our community in different ways. So if you look at the framework under the principle of protect public health, that's been a huge focus of where we've been for the last few months. And Commissioner Rogers was also on the work group. So if I'm getting any of this wrong, please jump in. So with our just rough estimates right now, right, COVID-19, it's a public health crisis. So right now, the proposal is the lion's share, or 56% of the funding, is allocated towards protecting public health. But we know there will be more. We've also wanted to help stabilize our local economy. So there were ideas that were discussed last week and work that both the internal work group had done and our colleagues with the Business Assistance Program. So we plugged those in, as well as you see specific areas where the work group had identified ideas. Some are covered, some have proposals, specifically under childcare, workforce training, countywide stable housing, countywide service for homeless population, and food access. We found there's other funding for. The last principle, or excuse me, the last two principles support Washington County community-based organizations and nonprofits. We know from the last 13 plus weeks that a lot of the work needed by our communities is being performed by our partners, community-based organizations and nonprofits. So we know they've had to respond to community needs, so their costs have increased, and we know there's continued work through the end of the year. So we tried to scope that out in the framework, proposing 8% of the funds there. And then lastly, we're very mindful of the fact that our many community members, it doesn't matter your station in life, but people have been very fearful of this coronavirus and have really done a tremendous job of self-isolating so that we could ensure we were preserving our healthcare system and so forth. But we've gotten to the point where I applaud Commissioner Skouten's bravery in going to a restaurant last night. Not everyone is there yet. We have a lot of community events that have been canceled for this summer. And so the very interaction that people need as a sense of community, the framework for that is missing. So we thought, well, we know we have great community partners here. Can we invest some dollars to help build that mental health capacity and community psyche? So the framework has 1% of funding there. And then we know, since we're dealing with cost estimates at this stage, that we should be prepared to have some money in contingency. Phew. So that's the overview of the principles, ideas under them, and just a base framework.
And just for clarification, none of that changed between the two versions. It's just allocation that changed. Is that correct?
None of the principles changed.
Right.
That's correct. Right. So is now a good time to go over version 2?
Can I just, I don't know why I see this, but underneath your third page, under Build Public Mental Health and Community Psyche,
Yep.
it's summer
Yeah.
camps, not summer. We'd like to have, we will hope we get summer camps, but it's really summer camps. So that's my spell check for today, and I'm done with it.
Thank you. Okay, so version 2. What we, thank you to Clean Water Services for putting together an estimate of costs for responding to the coronavirus, making sure that we continue to have rock-solid stormwater and sewerage agency that was protecting public's health and also our employees' health and their families' health as a result. That really helped us since Friday, but particularly yesterday, get our heads around how we might proceed with evolving the framework to be mindful of the level of investment needed, while also sticking to making sure that we're following board direction on advancing the 4 principles. Hence version 2. So what it really does is increases the funding level under Protect Public Health. So under funding for city special districts, that amount increased to $10 million. So that would take Protect Public Health as a principle up to just over 61%. Now, mind you, we have to stay within the $104 million. So we had to figure out how to be true to that. So you see on the second packet, the pink lines are the line items that were adjusted in order to stay within the $104 million. So we'll still have the small business assistant grants to the tune of $9 million. We'll continue, we'll move forward with helping address our really desert need for childcare. Adjusted the amount on countywide stable housing. And what this formula does is we just tried to make an estimate. So originally, we said, okay, if average rent, which we know from our housing experts, is about $1,000 a month, and for the 6-month period, it would be $1 million would help house 166 families. So originally, in version 1, we said, well, what if we allocate $7 million to get over 1,000 families? What version 2 does is it adjusts it to $6 million. So just under 1,000 families, 996 families. And then under the CBOs, it reduced that percentage down from 8% of the total to just over 5%. I don't mean to gloss over any of this information at all, but I wanted to make sure that we had plenty of room for questions and discussion. At this point, let me look over to Mr. Rhodes and Commissioner Rogers to see if there's anything I got wrong or missed, or anything they'd like to add?
No, the only thing I'd add is that I had in my mind two themes. One, we principle-based, and you can see that. I think that's fair. And the other one, that we should put priority to county-wide services and stick with our strategic plan, which says what services are county-wide. And obviously, public health is things that we do here in the county, not in cities. And so when you look at the theme with that lens, you start distributing dollars differently. So that's just the beginning of it. And then we can all talk about how the allocations go.
So that's why you see a column called countywide with ones that we know for sure would be applied countywide. Some of the line items under public health, we will be applying certainly as Washington County, but since the ideas under there are not limited to Washington County, we didn't just select all of them. Did I get that right? If you have a correction, you got to come up. Yeah.
Something? Oh, there we go. Well, I was told not to touch the microphone anymore, so. So pardon me. So what I was saying is we wanted to distinguish between countywide, Washington County, the geography, versus Washington County, the agency. Within public health, obviously, there's a lot of things that are countywide geography, but there are things that are specific to the agency. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rhodes, anything else?
I don't believe so. Just the one underlying theme I know everybody's aware of, but this has to be COVID-19 related based on the federal guidance.
And we did receive an update to the federal guidance dated May 28th. So I went through that and staff went through that. So. Any questions?
Yes. So on version 2, this is the first time I've seen version 2. I've seen
It's the first
this
time
one.
for all of us.
So on page 1 of version 2, the bottom two pink ones, I'm confused as to what that is versus the 9 million that you've got on the second page and the other dollars that you've got on the second page. So I'm confused. What's that $10 million represent?
Are you saying the 9 million under the business section, Jerry, on the second page?
No, I'm
I
talking
see-
about first
but you-
page,
I know, I see that. but
two
you-
bottom pink ones. What is that?
But then you compared it to page 2.
Okay, so page 1 is under the principle of public health. So these two pink lines that add up to 10 million, this is for all 13 cities and the major service districts in Washington County, setting aside $10 million total to cover their costs for responding to COVID. For example, these kind of ideas, but from their jurisdiction.
In the public health realm.
In the public health realm, yes.
Okay, so then you go to page 2, and under stabilized local economy, 26,757,000.
Yes.
That is different from the 10 million we just talked about on page 1.
Correct.
Okay.
So
right.
everything on
I
page
see.
2 falls under the principle of stabilized local economy. So, for example, under countywide, under the Economic Recovery Fund proposal, Business Assistance Work Group reimbursing the cities for their grant program, right?
Yeah, I see all of that, and I
Okay.
see the number changes, basically reduced the stabilized local economy by $3 million in those categories. I see that. So I'm assuming are we going to talk about the allocation that's proposed separately?
So what, this is, this sheet is a sample investment. So it's not a set allocation, but we're trying to learn from the Clean Water Services experience and figure out, we're trying to figure out, well, so somewhere between the version 1 of $4.25 million and $10 million, we're trying to zero in on what might be an appropriate figure for the framework. And so what we leveraged was the Clean Water Services information, which you can see over on the right in tiny print. They'd requested $2 million for one set of costs, and then for having the residential and small business utility rate assistance, they had requested $3 million. Okay?
I
But
see. So
in
I'm
order-
sorry, I see my confusion. This list is $10 million is all related to the front
Correct.
page $10 million.
Correct.
I get it now.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So we might go out to the jurisdictions and say, here's our baseline. But if your jurisdictions don't need those monies, then great. There may be other jurisdictions that are over theirs. Or it could be that the full 10 million isn't needed as well. But we had to start
obviously,
somewhere.
these organizations and cities are going to have to justify compliance
Yep.
with the CARES purposes and things like that. But I think this is an interesting list, having not seen it before. I don't know if it's pertinent to what the cities and the spatial districts are thinking, but it's interesting, I guess. But yeah, as long as they all comply, because, some of the small cities are definitely going to have trouble, I believe, complying with the requirement from CARES funding, so.
What do you
anyway,
mean?
Well, the smaller cities like Banks and Durham,
Durham has. We'll talk
yes,
about
and
that,
we,
yeah.
I don't know what COVID-19 impacts they've had, but, because I haven't heard, but I would imagine they're all trying to probably reconfigure some of their facilities to be in compliance with new social distancing.
PPE too.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's right, in the PPE. So anyway, yeah, I don't want to get into those weeds, I just understand that now.
So if we were able to cover all those costs, we'd love to. But we also, taking the Clean Water Services example, realized that we're not going to be able to cover all those costs within the 104 million. So we had two different approaches. One is take the 104 million and say, it's only going to cover the protect public health cost that Washington County, the agency, and our other public agencies have, and that's it. Or stick with the principles that this board gave direction on and have to limit the public health reimbursement, but ensure that we're putting dollars into action to help our community. And so we chose to list out version 2. So that's the other sheet I haven't spent any time on here in the packet, these two tables. It's just an at a glance of the
Yeah.
proportional difference, right? There could have been a version 3, and Steve and Elizabeth and I talked about it briefly yesterday afternoon. There could have been a version 3 that put 100% of the dollars on public health. But we thought, that isn't true to the principles, So we thought we'd stick to the principles and only put 2 versions into play.
There's another reason that also we tried not to put everything into the public health, because we knew we could, but those agencies have other means of recovery, FEMA being one, whereas we believe the businesses and the community may not have other avenues. And so that led us to try to make sure we were still supportive, and perhaps having to limit a little bit what the public agencies are doing in order to support the community.
So did you have communications with special districts, cities other than Clean Water Services on the making up of this list?
No, we
Well, hang on a sec.
well, I'll
Go
finish
ahead.
my thought, and then
Yeah,
we've not communicated directly with them on it. We've given them all the information, told them what we're working on. And these numbers that we put in, we're just trying to show how it might be allocated. We fully expect we're going to have to look at what we get from everybody and make the allocation based on that. This was just a way to try to, in our minds, be able to see what 10 million, how that could be allocated to the public agencies.
so I was in communication with the board presidents of various service districts. So I did share the framework out of the packet with all of them. And this I shared with the mayors as well, and with the mayors, we discussed it in our weekly now, every other week, COVID-19 chair mayors meeting. So it's a good starting point, but we did not make the call to action to say, okay, what are your specific costs, in order to see how it would land, because we wanted and needed to come here first in order to have a board agreed upon framework or bucket list, whatever.
And I've shared the material with all the city managers and all the district administrators, advised them that we're going to be asking them for numbers, start getting them ready, telling them what the guidance is and everything. So I think they're prepared once we say, okay, but we didn't want to get ahead of the board in where we're going with that, so.
Steve, have they seen these numbers?
No.
No.
Those are.
Everything version 2 is in just the quick turnaround of internalizing the information from Clean Water Services and trying to scope out what would be a more reasonable framework for ensuring that some of the public health costs for cities and service districts are covered, while being mindful of the fact that they do have other funding sources other than CRF to use.
And I think, quite frankly, I don't think we intend to say, here's your number. That was just an exercise for us to see what 10 million would do. We want to go to them and say, now give us your number, and then we're going to have to sort through the numbers to figure that out.
And we will likely have to be the bad guys and say, well, collectively, it's all going to have to fit within 10 million, because the board wants to ensure that we're helping our community partners that don't have access to other programs like you do through FEMA, but also because we need to make sure that we are helping our community and the economy recover in these months ahead in 2020.
So I have to assume then that all the organizations listed here would not qualify for reimbursement from the state.
Correct. The state excluded everybody in Washington County.
Not the Treasury, but the state.
Yeah, from those. If you read the new guidance from the Treasury, it says the state should have allocated that money out to all jurisdictions. But, the state can do what the state wants to do. So they excluded, and they did the same thing for cities in Multnomah County. They were all excluded from the funding that was available from the state.
Oh, city.
Well, and sticking with your your overview comment that these are just numbers on a page right now. They haven't been shared. Diane, obviously Clean Water Services represents in this allocation 40% of it. Could you give me some indication of some of the costs that Clean Water Services incurred and how we got to this?
Sure. So Clean Water Services is spending about $270,000 a month in COVID-related goods, services, and personnel costs. So we estimated through the end of the year, it'll be about 1.7 to 2 million is where we were. It's everything to the building modifications, putting shields up, controlling the building access, and some other security enhancement like out at the Fern Hill facility, increased disinfection and cleaning of the building, increased bathroom cleaning over at Fern Hill because in order to keep it open, we had to clean the bathroom twice a day. So it's those types of things, the economic analysis that we're seeing with Eco Northwest and those things. Then the residential and small business utility rate assistance, we estimated it at about $2.25 million to $3 million. Folks are struggling to pay their bills. Right now, we're just starting to get the data in from the cities, and there's anywhere from 10 to 15% of the people. So we're working with them to put them on payment plans, but many of them on payment plans can't even handle the payments. So it would be working not only with the Washington, the unincorporated residents, but also working with the cities to be able to provide some utility billing assistance.
And she's referring to the information that they provided on Friday, which I forwarded to all of you on Friday.
And the latest federal guidance made it clear that utility assistance for the customer was appropriate. You can't backfill revenue, but you can have assistance programs for your customers.
And
which will help some of the cities, I think, some of the small cities that were looking at that for their customers.
And I have a question related to. Yeah, it's on this
I'll
type
get
of thing.
there.
I just wanted to ask how similar the line item requests are that you're making to TVWD in relationship to customer costs and those types of things. So I don't know, but I'm just asking, I'm raising that issue because.
Well, all of the city water departments too.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
and Forest Grove also has electricity.
Electricity.
So they've all, to a certain extent, put in utility rate assistance programs.
I'm just raising that issue. Excuse me, Commissioner Scouten.
Oh, no, that's quite all right. I'm just sort of sorting through all this. I guess this is more of a theoretical question maybe at this point, but so what we can provide to the cities and special districts will be some percentage, certainly not 100% of their COVID-related entitled expense reimbursements. And the thought would be in part there's other funding sources as well. Are they going to be turning to us and say, so you should also not take the full, I mean, are we looking at fully reimbursing our expenses? Or are we also looking at the concept that there's going to be a couple different funding sources and streams, one of which is this particular CARES Act funding, but that we also will be eligible for FEMA funding, et cetera?
We are and would be, but we're at this point funding our costs because it's a countywide service that we're providing. We're covering those through the CARES Act.
All right. So our response to well, why are you fully reimbursing yourself when you're not fully reimbursing us is, at least in principle part, that our services we're providing is for everyone in the county.
It's countywide service.
Okay.
And we might find that our costs are higher as well.
And we may find that our costs are higher.
Never know.
And the other thing that I didn't mention about other funding is there is work on a bill in Congress that would fund these cities that were left out in the first round. So there's still that potential for them as well down the road. But it's, who knows when that will come.
If I had my druthers, what we'd do is, one, the board would agree to the 4 principles that are buckets, if you will, that we came up with, so that we could at least say that we're on the right track. I'd love to allocate the 54 million. I'm only speaking for myself, not for the committee, so that we understand that that's off the table as far as any other allocations. I'd love to do the 2.5, the 500,000, the 2 million, the million, and the $9 million of business support. I think we need to get that in the pipeline immediately. I would take off on version 2. I like the version 2, 10 million, but I would take off the amounts than probably clean water, because clean water is more, to me, a county-wide service. But the other, we're going to have lots of fights. I just looked, I hadn't seen this allocation, but and I'm not picking on the service districts, but they're getting almost double what my 5 cities are getting in allocation. And the population isn't any different, so I think that they're going to argue about that. The city of Wilsonville, which I represent and has about less than 50 votes, is getting the same allocation as the city of Sherwood, who has 21,000 people down there, or 28, depending how you count. And so I'm anticipating the mayors are going to argue. Why do we get in the fight? Why don't we just simply say that, you know, there's $6 million, come up with some costs, and we might have to make a difficult decision between them. Then also on this list, Steve,
Which we could do.
yeah, we could.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but not show them amounts, so you guys show us bills, and we'll allocate $6 million. Then there's a Tiger-Tualatin pools, that's a special service district, that's not on this list.
Oh, there's 15 service districts in Washington County.
Which other ones are I missing?
Oh, Raleigh Hills Water District. We just tried to stick with the most significant ones.
But again,
That's a big
quite
one for me
frankly,
down there.
in my opinion, this sheet should disappear after today. It was only an exercise to try to show what 10 million would do.
So you're not going to put it out there?
No,
No,
that's why it
no,
says
it is not.
sample investment. I know it says
Yeah.
it in little,
I thought that was going to be shared, but I still would, maybe to the point, the chair, maybe we list all special service districts, so you guys all fight it out over the $6 million, but come into some amount. But I think to us making the allocations and jumping into the fire. But I would love to get our $54 million set so we have it, and I would like to get the stuff under the stabilized local economy set so we can get that group that Jerry and Pam serve on, get that money out. These folks are desperate down there.
I want you to know that generally what you're talking about has already been out there, and I've been fielding a lot of heat on it. And some of you may have as well. But to think that we can proceed without something along the lines of what version 1 or version 2 has, I don't think is a prudent idea.
I hear you. We can certainly adopt version 2. I like that one a lot better. But I'm just saying to get the funds out, get them moving.
If we adopt this, I don't know what would keep us from getting the funds out.
I don't know.
Okay.
That part I don't know.
It sounds like you're wanting to piecemeal get this taken care of, and I think the proposal from the group probably, and you represent the group, would be it's kind of a package deal. We just need to figure out what's in the packages. I think this $10 million just leaves, it's just $10 million. And I don't know who would oversee this allocation and all this kind of stuff, but it's $10 million.
This is just an illustration.
Yeah, that's right. I got that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm fine with that part of it. I would agree with Commissioner Rogers. If this were the proposal with the numbers attached, we'd probably have further discussion. Yeah. But if as long as it's just a package, $10 million that goes into that grouping, I'm fine with that.
That's why it's a separate side sheet
Right.
with the word sample on it. Yep.
Make no mistake, I agree with version 2. I just was hoping, I didn't know if we could start getting funds out, so let's get the funds out we can get out. as soon as we can.
We're already working for the funds were approved last week, or were given a thumbs up last week. So that's already working, but we have been working to make sure we were able to move stuff out as soon as the board has made a decision. And then we have one more step. We have to figure out who's going to handle each of the packages. And then we're ready to go. We've been hiring people in finance to help manage the contracts. County Council has moved their staff around so that they're able to support the needs on that. So, and we're getting a lot of work already from the business assistance group. So we are starting, I think, hopefully this week we'll be able to start getting funds moving, things happening.
I just want to speak to one more item, and I think it's not intuitive, but you'll see it is. Under the stabilize the local economy, the $4 million for childcare, probably wouldn't resonate for some of us of a certain age, but I can tell you that for workers in general, without childcare, they can't get back to work. And so it's one that people might say, well, why in the world would you do that? Because we want people to get back to work. And so I would hate to see us remove that item. I think it's an important one.
Well, you know, there's also people who take care of grandchildren as
Yeah,
opposed to
okay,
their
I'm
children.
sorry, stand corrected.
So,
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
I think this is great. I really appreciate all this work. I'm okay with version 2. You know, the county's kind of in this squeezed position between the state trying to micromanage us and the cities and social districts pushing, you know, for their piece of the pie as well. My feeling about the state is that they have enough going on, and I think that one of the overarching, and this is my guess here, I haven't really looked at the legislative intent, but my guess is that the feds, when they made these allocations for 500,000 population plus jurisdictions, their thought was that these are larger, more complex organizations, and that the internal decision-making of those large organizations ought to be the ones that be responsible for dealing with those more complexities. And they had to draw a line somewhere, and they chose 500,000. You know, that left Clackamas County out, but if you went to 400,000, then that would leave out Jackson County or something, you know. So it never ends. So you draw a line. 500,000 is actually a number that NACO uses to come up with a category of sort of its own subset of larger counties that have their own unique issues and problems and have their own kind of organization subset within NACO. So, and I would say the state that, you know, we're a large organization, deemed to be so by the feds. You got enough on your plate. Don't try to micromanage what we're doing. I think that by providing a 60% plus for the public health side and 25% for the business economic development, that's a defensible number, and go away and take care of your many, many, many problems you've got on the statewide level.
So I'm comfortable
Politely, but
with where we are
go away.
with this
Version 2?
piece. Well, not quite yet.
Or you
So
mean
I'm
the
just at the-
illustration?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and I understand that. And this discussion has been around that. I'd like to move to stabilize the local economy for a minute. Are we okay making that transition?
Yeah.
And I'd like to ask some questions about version 1 and version 2. So on Friday, when we got I think it was Friday, when we got version 1, was it Friday or Thursday? Yeah, something like that. And I was surprised to see the allocation of $1 million to reimburse the county for the small business support program. That was good. I just want to make the statement that the intention out of the work group that was working independently of the CRF something group that you two were on was that the reimbursement money that would go back to the cities was intended to have them re-up their program and continue to give more money out into the communities for the businesses. So my question is...
Which they may choose to do.
Right. But my question is, what is the intention in your mind of the $1 million back to the county as reimbursement? And the reason I ask that question is that in the early discussions, we were talking about the reimbursement for the work that we were doing potentially coming from FEMA. So we talked about that early on. If in fact this $1 million will be dedicated to going out to the small businesses again, leveraged against the original, I'm comfortable with version 2.
And that is a board decision.
Okay.
And we've not tried to make that decision through this framework.
Thank you.
I believe we talked about that earlier when we put our weight behind taking the money out of Washington County contingency to put it
Right.
into the Washington County small business. We said if these dollars are reimbursable, we could just turn right around and reissue another round.
Right.
But
Can I
that's-
can I add to that? We did talk about the work group, and your thought is exactly what we talked about.
Okay, thank you.
That it
Because
shouldn't be just general fund
because that, in
supplement.
But this
fact-
framework doesn't
Right,
make that decision.
Right.
This board makes that
I
decision.
understand, but that we agree.
And the reason I'm asking the question is that last week, we asked for the 5 million plus 10 million, and I'm comfortable where we are on version 2 if the 1 million and the 9 million equal that 10 million in money going back out to the businesses potentially. So that's, and
agree.
then I'm comfortable supporting this. But I just wanted to make the statement and make sure that, that was the discussion. Thank you.
So going back to the childcare discussion, because we've had this, Pam and I and John Southgate and a few others have had that conversation about how do we best help our childcare industry.
And we had a significant conversation at the work group, and I talked to Pam offline about that and said this work group was going to put significant weight behind that and leverage our agency work and have it even more appreciable. So it could be with new businesses and whatnot, but so it's not embedded in the small business assistance program, but having a standalone one. So your proposal of last week, and this is one reason why I voted against that, was you included it under this whole special needs with multiple line items at 2 million, and I felt that was too small for making a measured approach, a measured step on the childcare need, because pre-COVID, we already had here statewide in every single county a shortage of childcare. And we know from the sector guidance that the existing childcare businesses can only operate at 50% capacity. So we have a doubly bad problem. And so that's where the work group had already been working on a very significant childcare line item. But you've got 2 million as part of what you all proposed, great. But this proposal, both in version 1 and version 2, had a more significant move on childcare because of the impact to the economy.
Yeah, I guess that I was going that direction a little bit, but not. I was more asking of what discussions you had on how you could utilize that $4 million to help these businesses.
Well, we've had limited staff capacity and commissioner capacity to both put together the framework and work on the nuts and bolts of the deployment. So we still have some work to figure out, but we do know from HHS that they've got experience working and helping with licensing for childcare. I also, to make sure that we had that right-sized, we have, as of the Best American Community Survey, data available, 6% of our population is aged 5 years or younger, and 12.5% is 9 years or younger, to the tune of almost 75,000 kids. So that was another way to scope out, how do we have a significant program to help shore up that loss of capacity? So that's just how, and trying to balance all of the needs from all of these principles. We came up with that.
I just share, we've, our efforts focused on figuring out the matrix and all of that. We've really not done anything on, okay, now what do you do? That's our next step. Once the board's given the green light to it, then the group is going to have to sit down and figure out, okay, now how do we do this? And that's going to be, what are the connections that we can make that can most efficiently get these dollars into the community?
So then could we take out of the $2 million under the special needs, including workforce training, job access, blah, 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 we can basically eliminate the thoughts that we had about the child care program and distribute that over to you. I mean, realizing that description gives you plenty of latitude anyway, but so as to not double dip, we'll look to the child care group with $4 million to cover that part of it.
Well, it's hard for me to know in the other proposal that you put in, and this is the words right there, you had workforce training and job access, PPE for small business, child care grant program, guidance for safety measures, and other. So you could also take 5 categories, divide it by 5, and move 1/5 of that back down to child care and put it there too.
Well,
I don't know what rigor.
I don't want to get into that detail. I was just so as to make sure that childcare is covered. I think that was our primary focus. And this is the first time actually that this number has popped up significantly in that category. So I'm okay with that. I'm just saying that we want to make sure we're covered.
Well, I'm not okay that it's down from 5 million because I think we've got a huge need for it. But,
So
you
may
know,
I-
it's.
Well, we all
it
took
is
a $1
what it
million
is.
haircut to get to that, so.
So may I ask a question here? First of all, I want to state that, as I think all of you know here, I am a proponent of making sure that we are addressing childcare. That's very important to me. It falls here under the stabilization of the local economy. So the concept here is childcare and getting people back into their work situations. Are we limiting ourselves by calling this childcare? And the reason I ask that question is that there are not equal, but there are also needs in our community for elder care, for people who are taking care of an elderly family member but can't get back to work. Is it childcare and associated needs or something to that effect that didn't just put the parameters around childcare? And I'm only raising this as a discussion point.
Well, our investigation showed there's a lot of money going into elder care
Okay, thank you.
and not into child care. That was the
Okay.
reason that we
I'm
looked
not
at
aware of
child
that.
care.
I'm a little confused on what was being, not with yours, Pam, but with Jerry, are you saying to take the 4 million out of the stabilized local economy and putting it somewhere else? You're not.
No, it was just
He's saying
terminology, so.
take child care grant program out of the special needs above.
Oh, that's
And
what
what
you're
I'm
saying.
saying is, well, I know we tried to use some rigor in all of these line items in the framework, and I can't speak to the rigor for 5 categories, 2 million. So it's like, well, if you want to move 1/5 of the funding down and bump child care up, I'm good with that.
And that obviously was not the purpose of that conversation. Okay. Pam, did you have more questions? I'm sorry.
No.
Well, I guess I like the part about the contingency fund. I like having that allocation at the bottom. I don't, oh, the rent and mortgage assistance, I see the example you've got there. Is that kind of the guideline that you're going to follow, the $1,000 a month for 6 months? Was that just an example, or was that kind of the general guideline that you're going to follow with that money?
It's taking the experience from our community development group and HHS, and our housing group. I'm sorry, I keep calling it HHS. And our housing group, so the expertise there in terms of what an average apartment cost is, and getting our head around how many people might we be able to apply if we invest, in this case, $6 million. So it's grounded in their expert experience. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that that's how it's going to be allocated, because it's usually a needs-based allocation. We, again, just like in the city one, just tried to see what the amount of money, what it could do at some level. So it's just an example.
Yep, that's as much rigor as we've been able to put into it.
A little more than that.
A little more than that,
But close.
but something like that, yeah.
It's back of the napkin.
So have we, and I guess, probably getting way ahead of the plan here, but Community Action obviously does this and has communicated their shortfalls and things like that. Is that an organization we'd consider partnering with in this?
I don't think we're ready for that conversation yet. That's what the work group needs to do, is sort that out. We're cognizant of all of the different agencies that we can partner with. But our effort has first been to figure out what we're getting out, and then we'll go into how to get it out.
Well, yeah, and I think the reason why I asked that question is that we've had conversation in the business group about how best and efficiently and not putting additional stress on our staff capacity to facilitate getting this money on the street at the same time without overburdening our staff one more time. So that was why I asked the conversation about the
Appreciate
RIF
that.
system.
And I have too. I mean, it's the same thing. Find out the way. The only thing is every dollar we put out the door has to have a contract with it. Even if it's going to another agency, we still have to have an agreement with them on how they distribute. So, you know that from what you guys are doing.
Well, yeah, because we had Jack and representative from finance, and then also Courtney, is it, Alan?
Yes.
Yeah, that joined us on our phone conversation the other day. It was very helpful to have them there, and we appreciated that support. So good job on getting that taken care of.
I'd just like to say before we go any further that Commissioner Scout and I disagree with you, but this is a friendly disagreement from the standpoint that I think that this represents a lot more than the back of the envelope.
Well,
and I know you were talking about it being a flexible document.
Well, I mean, maybe 10 or 15 envelopes.
And I just like to commend
Work
the,
your way through. I mean, there's a certain, this is not, what I meant to say, this is a work in progress.
and I understand
It's a
that.
great first marker.
And I'd just like to say that I also recognize that there has been a tremendous amount of work in this process. And there is a tremendous amount of thought that's gone into it. And I recognize how hard this is. And there's been a lot of work from the standpoint of developing the principles to start out with, to working through what needs to fall under the principles, to working to the end point of getting the $105 million allocated. So, and I also recognize that you've had pressure from other groups, including us, to make things move more quickly. So I just want to say thank you.
Dick, your comment about on the back of the napkin was received as well as when I said fudge factor last week, okay? So we have to choose our terminology carefully around this group.
Well, I think it's more, you can kind of overanalyze or I mean, this is still a work in progress, but this was some great work done. I appreciate it very much.
So next step forward, from what I'm hearing, is that version 2 is acceptable. Obviously, there'll be more work to define this, but is that what we're going to do today? Adopt that?
That was our hope, is that at the board meeting, that's why we've got it slated on the agenda, that the board would adopt version 2 or version 1, and then we can move forward from that.
I am in favor of that. I'd also like to request that there be just in the board meeting, and I believe it would be you, Mr. Rhodes, that I'm asking this of, and that's a discussion about where the money came from, how this is different than our regular budget process, how this relates to public input and some other pieces, because I think it's very important, especially since our budget process has been very close in timing to this process. But I think it's really important to outline what our responsibility for federal dollars is within the county and why this process was followed in the manner it was.
Yep. Are you okay to do that? Okay, great. So that would mean that under item 6D, that the version 2 document would the associated document for that action item.
Does everybody agree with that?
Approve recommendation of the Coronavirus Relief Fund Work Group. So version 2 would go into the meeting record. Okay. That's it for this portion of the work session. We have our business meeting at 10 o'clock. Will we have a copy of the statement at everyone's station? Yep. No, that's the Pride Proclamation. The statement regarding the death by force of George Floyd
Haven't
and the
seen it
need
yet.
for racial justice.
And are you reading that?
I forgot to ask if you wanted to each take a part or if you want me to read it all. Are you okay with my reading it?
I'm okay with that. I would just like a moment to be able to say I support that.
Yep. Okay. And I'll also be saying I'm reading it on behalf of the full board.
Is there a hard copy of this laying around? I'm trying to find where that is.
Staff is working on it.
Okay.
Yep.
That's fine.
Okay, so without further ado, we'll take a break in our work session and reconvene at 1 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
No, we'll reconvene our work
Oh, work
session at
session,
1
excuse me.
o'clock.
Yeah.
Thank you for switching.
Thank you.